Marshall, joined in the booth by Jacob Van Lunen. Jacob, we are going to see a blue-red pseudo-mirror this round. Both players are playing blue-red. They're taking very different approaches to what you can do in those two colors in this format. One of the decks, I actually had a chance to play this week against it on Magic Online, and I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, I remember a text message from you saying, have you seen this deck before? And then just a bunch of pictures of Fevered Visions and Elder Deep Fiends and Pilgrim's Eyes and whatever was happening.
All right, we'll tell you more about it when we get down to the floor. Let's go down there right now and watch some blue-red pseudo-mirror. Hello and welcome to Round 5 coverage of Grand Prix Pittsburgh. I'm Brian David Marshall. I'm joined in the booth by Jacob Van Lunen. And there you see, he's in the Pro Tour Champions Club with you, Jacob, Steve Rubin. And he's playing Blue-Red Fevered Emerge. And he's playing against Ryan O'Coin, who is playing Blue-Red Control. What's the difference in these two decks? Like, what is going on? I mean, I guess it's hidden in the title there. Fevered Visions is at the center of Steve Rubin's deck.
Yeah, and that's a pretty impressive card to have in your main deck when you're playing against a control opponent. So I think that's one thing we can expect to be really exciting here from Steve Rubin.
And there is Fevered Visions, but it is taken out with a counterspell right away. I don't recognize that artwork, I'm going to be honest with you.
I believe it's a negate.
I'm assuming it's a negate based on
I think it's the new negate.
Context clues. So what is Steve Rubin trying to do here with this Fevered Visions deck?
Well, so he has a bunch of like classic kind of like removal spells, but they're weird removal spells. They're cards like Fiery Temper and Lightning Axe. And then what he does is he uses cards that make him discard cards and then draw cards, like Cathartic Reunion. And then he's able to put cards like Prized Amalgam and Advanced Stitchwing and Stitchwing Scab into his graveyard.
We got a reader here. Here's an Advanced Stitchwing hardcast from Steve Rubin.
Yeah, the thing that's really exciting about this, though, is that all of these can come down for discounted cost, which when he returns them to play from the graveyard. And then he gets to return Prized Amalgams to play for free. And then once he gets to a certain stage of the game, he can use Sanctum of Ugin in conjunction with some number of Elder Deep Fiend to just lock the opponent out of the game while he attacks 2 or 3 times for lethal.
Meanwhile, Ryan O'Coin is Glimmer of Genius at the end of the turn. Ryan O'Coin coming off of winning an SCG Regionals last week. I'm assuming playing a very similar deck. His deck's a little more traditional. And there we see the crux of his deck, Dynavolt Tower.
Yeah, a really exciting card here where you start getting energy whenever you cast an instant, and then you end up just being able to lightning bolt people just for spending energy, which is so exciting. So,
by the way, Magic players have very long memories because when our showrunner was gathering a little intel about Ryan was quick to point out, I lost to Steve Rubin in round 9 of Grand Prix Charlotte 2 years ago.
It's easy to remember the ones you lose.
Yeah, so Stitchwing comes in, another Advanced Stitchwing comes down. This is not quite the way the deck gets drawn up for Steve Rubin, but, if his opponent deals with them, he could also bring these back and start, really having a nice long game here in a control mirror.
Yeah, and this card actually, when played like this, is pretty strong in this type of matchup. Now, when we're playing against like more aggressive decks, obviously you could just get run over if you're trying to hard cast Advanced Stitchwings.
But it's a Harness Lightning, and it takes out the freshly cast Stitchwing.
Yeah, now he can just pay 3 mana and put that back into play, and 4 toughness is a pretty big game in this format.
So Anticipate brings the Dynavolt Tower up to 6 energy. It is online.
It's online, ready to bolt. You can now combine it with a Fiery Temper to take down the other Advanced Stitchwing if
there
he
you
so
get a
desires.
look at the Baltimore-based player, Ryan. They're just sort of confirming energy totals here. It's like, okay, you killed this, you did that. Okay, yes. You're good. Stitchwing comes in. Ryan's going to fall to 14.
Kind of exciting deck here from Steve.
Yeah, it was really a strange looking deck when I played against it. It was like, what is happening here? And it's really, and that fevered vision's in stock. You really get to see this deck gets to capitalize on all those extra cards. Steve Rubin, of course, Pro Tour, Shadows over Innistrad, Pro Tour champion.
Yeah, with the green-white tokens deck. And there are some decks in Standard right now that look very similar to that, so it's surprising that he didn't choose to play a deck which had given him a Pro Tour victory. But at the same time, this is much more exciting for me.
So here we see, this is exactly what you're talking about. At the end of the turn, taps some mana, discards Prized Amalgam and Fiery Temper, gets the Madness trigger off the Fiery Temper, does an additional 3 to Ryan, and brings back a Stitchwing.
And that can be a problem. Like, this is...
And brings back an Amalgam.
This is really hard to deal with, the longevity of this game plan from Steve Rubin. And it looks kind of funny. He's hard casting advanced Stitchwings, but this control deck is not used to things having 4 toughness because they don't in this format for the most part. And Steve Rubin's taking full advantage of that.
And so Rubin's going to attack. Not with the Prized Amalgam here. Thinking about Torrential Gearhulk, no doubt.
Yeah.
And then here comes a Harness Lightning. No Gearhulk, just Harness Lightning.
Yeah, just Harness Lightning. I mean, it...
Which brings him, by the way, up to 10 energy. Now he's going to fall down to 9. That doesn't make any sense, but okay.
Yeah, well, he gains 3, then minus 4.
Yeah. He just shortcutted that. And now we're going to see him Galvanic Bombardment and then finish things off with the Dynavolt Tower to take down both of the Stitchwings. Stays at 11 here.
I love it.
There's more where that came from, says Steve Rubin. But that's going to get disallowed.
And Ryan just getting all these free lightning bolts as the game drags on. He's got to feel pretty good about his current position in this game. But, Steve could win out of nowhere. His opponent's at 11. He's an Elder Deep Fiend deck.
And he does have one in hand. You see him trying to figure it out. Again, 6 mana from a blue opponent. Just nothing good can come of attacking into that.
Yeah.
A Torrential Gearhulk here would represent an energy boost. It could be a counter spell. It could be a removal spell.
One thing here is that the Prized Amalgam, the body is no longer overly... Because the Dynavolt Tower could easily just deal with it, so... It looks like Ryan just took the 3, which is really surprising to me.
Okay, here's another advanced Stitchwing. This is kind of a weird draw for Steve Rubin. And then Disallow is going to counter that. There you get a look at the advanced Stitchwing. 3/4 Zombie Horror. And then the important text here is really that graveyard rule text, which says if it's in your graveyard, you can return it to the battlefield by discarding 2 cards, paying 3 mana. Prized Amalgam just keeps pecking away.
Yeah. And some interesting stuff that's happening here. I mean, Ryan doesn't really have to tap much mana on his turn, which is something that's got to kind of frustrate Steve in this matchup. But in the same way, I mean, if Ryan goes for anything, it seems like he doesn't really have much in the way of reaction. I think Steve could land an Elder Deep Fiend and kind of win the game in a lot of situations.
Here's a glimmer of genius from Ryan. looks like he's going to take this opportunity to bring back an advanced stitch wing. That's going to give him another prized amalgam as well.
Yeah, and now with that mana open, if Ryan, could find some way to get the advanced stitch wing off the table, then on the following turn, then Steve can respond with the Elder Deep Fiend, at which point it's basically game over. Unless Ryan also has a counterspell to go along with it.
So he shoots down that prized amalgam, the one that was in play. Infinite lands here for Ryan. In comes the prized amalgam. He's like, let me get the correct prized amalgam here. Looks like 2 Torrential Gearhulks in hand for Ryan. Yep, and there is a Gearhulk.
Yeah, and it's a big boy.
And it is going to get a Harness Lightning, which is going to take down that advanced stitch wing. It's going to eat the prized amalgam, maybe. So targeting the advanced stitch wing, and that is going to suddenly shed its cocoon-like skin.
Yeah.
And become an Elder Deep Fiend. And he's going to tap the Gearhulk. He's going to tap 3 lands. Dynavolt Tower is going to shoot the amalgam. And nothing's going to happen. Other than tapping down Ryan's board.
And this 5/6 now, not very threatening. I mean, there's 5/6 to block on the other side of the table.
And there is Fevered Visions for Steve Rubin.
Did he return one?
He had returned one. And this is, Ryan is at 5, turtled up behind that Gearhulk. He's got another Gearhulk in hand. Looks like they are, okay, both
Yep.
of those come back. Passes the turn.
And he has another Deep Fiend, so.
The chain.
The chain. The chain not as exciting against these decks that have counter magic. Against a lot of decks, once you start seeing the chain of Deep Fiends, the game just ends. Because your opponent can't really block or interact in any meaningful way.
So you're saying when your opponent has 10 mana, Elder Deep Fiend's just not as interesting?
Yeah, I'm saying when your opponent has 10 mana and like Torrential Gearhulks and disallows, it's not quite what it can be in other situations.
There you get a look at the Elder Deep Fiend on 5/6.
This is about the slowest draw we could possibly imagine from Steve Rubin's deck. His first play of the
he
game.
hard cast every advanced stitch wing in his deck.
Yeah.
He hard cast every single one of them.
Yeah, maximum card value.
How scary is it to put a deck like Ryan's into a position where it's drawing 2 cards a turn with Fevered Visions?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because Fever Vision's usually at its best in these types of matchups, but, Ryan's down to a few enough cards at this point where it's no longer going to be effective in that same way.
So Torrential Gearhulk is going to come down. It's going to get a Glimmer of Genius. It's going to boost up the energy cap production for Dynavolt Tower.
And it looks like he found another Galvanic Bombardment, so he will get to continue fighting through this. This is a pretty interesting game. It's still pretty close, I imagine. The Fevered Visions definitely favors Steve here.
And again, Steve does have multiple fiery tempers in his deck. He's used one of them, but he can, if he can find 2 more of them, he can
end the game that way.
End the game that way, yeah. And if at any point Ryan just clogs up on lands in hand, he'll start taking damage to that Fevered Visions as well.
Yeah, Ryan needs to aggressively use the cards that are in his hand.
Here we see Steve bringing in Elder Deep Fiend, tapping 2 Torrential Gearhulks, tapping Dynavolt Tower.
I like that a lot.
Looks like a horribly Orion hand for
Yeah.
Ryan O'Coin. He's going to take this opportunity to shoot the Dynavolt, use the Dynavolt Tower to take down the Amalgam.
And I believe he does have enough to kill one of the Deep Fiends in hand.
Killing one of the Deep Fiends is not quite going to do it. You got to kill both.
5 power is the same as 5 life.
All right, Ryan passes the turn. Says draw. And he takes 2 from the Fevered Visions there.
And now any fiery temper is good enough. Steve attacking with the enchantment, jokingly. Fevered Visions is a really powerful spell.
And now, and look how good it is in Steve Rubin's deck. Because as he's drawing those cards, he can just pitch cards and start bringing advanced Stitchwinds back.
Yeah, whenever he
Basically
wants
every
to,
turn.
he can just pay mana and empty his hand at will. And it'll also bring back those prized amalgams to make things even more obnoxious for any sort of opponent. Like, this is a control deck's nightmare. This Steve had one of the worst draws you could possibly have, and it still just seems like the long game is so hard for Ryan here.
Now, you said this deck 5-0 to League on Magic Online, right?
It did, yeah. I think it was a few cards different than Steve's. Like, Steve's only playing 2 copies of Sanctum of Ugin, which, makes him less likely to just do the Elder Deep Fiend chain, but the deck does get small enough when you're, using cards like Cathartic Reunion and Tormenting Voice, so
it looks like Steve is going to activate Wandering Fumarole and then attack with everybody, and that's going to be enough for Ryan O'Coin. He says, fine, you got me eventually. The 3rd turn Fevered Visions didn't get me. The 17th turn Fevered Visions, that one got me.
That was certainly good enough. Fevered Visions, though. Wow.
Really, to me, the all-star there was Advanced Stitchwing. It was really a difficult card for Ryan to deal with in his deck. And, sometimes it came back and brought friends.
Yeah, when you look at the cards that are in Ryan O'Coin's deck, they do not match up well against 4 toughness creatures. He has cards like Incendiary Flow, Galvanic Bombardment. Harness Lightning can get it, but...
Hey, just let's stop for a second and take a look at what's going on screen here. To the Slaughter just took down a Saheeli Rai from Corey Baumeister out of the green-black Constrictor deck, playing against Copycat Control in the hands of Dan Fournier.
Put these very good players who you might not have heard of much. Corey Baumeister is Brad Nelson's younger brother.
Yeah, he's got a GP top 8. Made it, I think, to the finals of Grand Prix Miami. And
Yeah,
Daniel
with
Fournier's
one of the
got,
most obnoxious decks of all time, for what it's worth.
and Daniel Fournier, he's got 2 Grand Prix top 8s, and he's also a member of the World Magic Cup Team Canada.
I've actually sat next to Daniel Fournier on a plane.
Along with Daniel Goldfarb, who's actually also in the feature match area this round, playing against Dan Ward.
So many Dans over there.
Oh, yeah. A dizzying array of Dans. There you see a card on the upper side of Corey's board that is a card that Brad has had in his sideboard for Pro Tour Ether Revolt, and that he was very high on, Lifecrafter's Bestiary.
Yeah, we're watching this card go to work right now, and Corey's just getting to draw extra cards every turn while he's, applying pressure. And Daniel needs to put together a combo if he has any chance of winning this game. And this is a matchup that Daniel probably should feel really confident about. This is exactly where you want to be as one of these Saheeli decks. Is you want to be playing against these green-black decks because...
So there you see he gets to scry. And then if he plays a creature, he can pay a green and draw a card, which against the control deck, that is just pretty backbreaking.
Yeah, because you can just start, chaining things together, and it's very difficult for them to make you run out of resources ever.
There's some cool stuff you can do, too. Like, if you're really digging for a card, you can, play a 0-mana Walking Ballista and then pay green and draw a card.
If you have multiple copies of the Bestiary in play, you can pay 0 and just for each green draw a card. You can, sign in blood for GG.
But meanwhile, Servant of the Conduit and Rishka Pima Renegade are getting in and taking a big chunk of Fournier's life. And it's very interesting to me to see people still playing the copycat decks, because it's the one deck that just can't go toe-to-toe in the early game with this green-black Constrictor deck. It just does not have access to these really premium removal spells. You rely on some suddenly less premium red removal spells to interact with this green-black deck, and you're just not able to go match up quite as well. Your spells don't line up. Your Fatal Push doesn't line up very well against Shock.
Yeah, and I mean, Harness Lightning's still very good, obviously, but that's only one card. You can only play 4 copies of it.
So there is Winding Constrictor, draw a card, pay green. If Winding Constrictor wasn't unfair enough already.
Yeah. The scry ability on Life Predator's BCR is, absurd as well. The fact that you get to, just engineer your turns.
So here's Daniel going Glimmer of Genius, trying to find something. End attorney untaps. He has the whole combo in hand.
Yeah. Only one more mana necessary. Or I guess the way the blinks work out.
You don't even need one more mana.
He doesn't need one more. Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
He can just blink the land.
And that's what he's going to do.
Corey can have a grasp here.
Saheeli Rai. He's like, I'm going to make 1 million of these.
And Corey did lead up to 2.
Wow, Daniel Fournier, that is game 2.
Wow.
2 games to Daniel Fournier. Corey Baumeister falls by the wayside, falls to 4-1. And Copycat Control, a deck that was just beaten out of day 2 at the Pro Tour, alive and well here at 5-0 at Grand Prix Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and it might be a really good call for this weekend, because it looks like Mardu Vehicles, after putting 6 people into the top 8 of the Pro Tour last weekend, is kind of not around. It's a rarity to see it out here.
Meanwhile, we're back to our main match. You see Key to the City
out
of Steve Rubin. But it doesn't look like he has a third land. He's on the draw this game. And Anticipate is the play from Ryan O'Coin.
And not having a third land is pretty rough here. I mean, it seems hard to me to... Oh, he has double Fever Visions. That explains it. I was like, how do you keep a 2-lander without a Cathartic Reunion or Tormenting Voice? And 2 copies of Fever Visions and you're playing against a Drago deck. Makes a little more sense.
Just looking at Steve's list. Key to the City is a sideboard card for him. And I guess he's just looking for a way to punch through those Torrential Gearhalts in the late game.
Yeah, I mean, it also gives him just a very cheap way to discard cards that he can return from the graveyard. And then he can start untapping the key and then drawing extra cards also.
So we talked about advanced Stitchwing earlier, but he also has Stitchwing Scab in the deck, not a card we saw. And here you see Stitchwing Scab, exactly what you just talked about. Discard it, to the Key to the City, and then return it to play and also get a prized amalgam. But Brutal Expulsion is the play.
That's
here.
about the most perfect card in the universe there. It gets the prized amalgam like back into Steve's hand. It
Exiles.
exiles the Stitchwing.
Yeah. That is a pretty sweet card. And that's a main deck card here for Ryan.
Yeah, he's playing one copy of that in the main.
So Steve spends 2 mana to draw a card when he untaps the Key to the City. Seen that card show up on a lot of the improvised lists. It's pretty sweet when you get to improvise with the Key to the City and then untap and just
draw
get
some
a nice
cards
card
whenever
draw.
you want to.
Yeah.
Oh, there's an exciting card.
Dragon Master Outcast out of the sideboard for Ryan O'Coin. And that is going to demand an answer from Steve Rubin.
I wonder what kind of answer Steve Rubin has to a Dragon Master Outcast.
I mean, you're suggesting that maybe he hasn't left his lightning axes?
Yeah, I know. I don't think you keep your lightning axes in against the deck who's the only creatures you've seen are 5/6s. Ryan also has 5 untapped mana, all of which can make blue.
Oh, how about a Fiery Temper?
That'll do.
How about we
That'll
just go
do.
to Fiery Temper to Key to the City? And
Okay.
Ryan has nothing to say about that. And instead, gets to Glimmer of Genius at the end of the turn and just kind of craft his way towards some sort of long game plan. Draws 2 cards. Doesn't like the first 2 he looked at. Pushes them to the bottom. Untaps 6 lands to 4. Maybe going to play a 7th here.
And he has Gearhulk in hand, so things looking really good here for Ryan O'Coin with that Brutal Expulsion and Glimmer of Genius in the yard alongside a Torrential Gearhulk in hand with the mana to cast it.
But Steve Rubin's building his own fevered visions here with
Key to the City?
yeah, Key to the City. There's a Sanctum of Ugin. Torrential Gearhulk is just coming down.
Oh, yeah.
Going to do another Glimmer of Genius and basically get to untap and start whittling away at Steve Rubin. So it's going to start and discard Cathartic Reunion and Prized Amalgam to bring back an advanced Stitchwing. There's another Torrential Gearhulk in hand.
Oh, wow. This is just going to, get completely out of hand.
And there is Thing in the Ice.
Ooh.
Also an excellent card against this deck because
Yeah.
the worst place for most of the creatures in Steve Rubin's deck is in his hand. So Prized Amalgam, Advanced Stitchwing has a lot of work to do against that Torrential Gearhulk.
Thing in the Ice is such an exciting card. That's a card that I really wanted to be much better. I was always skeptical of it, but when it shines, it really does. And in post-border games in the standard format, you really get to play a game of chicken with your opponent about whether or not they're going to keep removal in or take it out. And it's very easy to end up with a 7/8 Awoken Horror.
Yeah.
When your opponent has sideboarded in such a way that they expect you to not have access to that type of card.
Here is Fevered Visions for Steve Rubin now.
It might be too late at this point.
But we're going to get another Torrential Gearhulk at the end of the turn. He's going to Brutal Expulsion. And has enough mana with his... has enough energy with his Dynavolt Tower that he's going to be able to bounce one and finish the other one off. Now, Steve Rubin has something to say.
Could be worse.
He's got an Elder Deep Fiend, and he's going to tap.
Yeah.
However, incidentally, tap Ryan's team here.
And able to sacrifice Sanctum of Ugin there to find himself another Elder Deep Fiend here.
Very nice.
Again, not the most exciting draw here from Steve Rubin, and yet he's still kind of getting those cogs going in the end game. You remember, he missed his third land drop and then had to dump a bunch of turns into Key to the City triggers.
So they're still trying to figure out where things are. See them pointing to thing in the ice. Got to remove a counter.
Yeah.
He's got another Elder Deep Fiend in hand. He shows him. And now, at the end of the turn, he's going to draw a card. How to pick up the prized amalgam as part of that brutal expulsion. But, yeah, this is a pretty overwhelming position here for Ryan. He's got Harness Lightning. He's able to take out the Elder Deep Fiend with it.
Yeah.
And that's enough for Steve Rubin. He says, let's go to game 3. Maybe rethink his sideboard a little once you see those things in the ice.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, when your opponent then has shown you cards like Dragon Master Outcast and Thing in the Ice, you know, you don't want to be cold to them, but at the same time, like, you don't want to be engineering your deck so that it looks like it should against aggressive decks. I mean, Steve, his plan against aggressive decks in the first game is Kozilek's Return, which is going to be awful against Ryan no matter how you cut it, and, like, no matter how he puts his deck together for games 2 or 3. So Steve's options for removal in post-border games, cards like Lightning Axe and Fiery Temper, those are the types of cards we're going to be seeing in the third game, I imagine, if he wants to beat Thing in the Ice.
It's a pretty narrow corridor of cards that Lightning Axe can kill in Ryan's deck.
Dragon Master Outcast and Thing in the Ice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't line it up right, that Thing in the Ice can backfire on you too. You know, it's not uncommon for that deck to have 2 spells in hand that it can, you know, that it's stockpiled, and to be able to just, you know, make the Awoken Horror show up in response to the removal spell.
Now, something that's kind of exciting about this deck that Steve's playing is that in a lot of ways, maybe he might just want to ignore those things. Because, again, we have not seen his deck operate at the level that it's capable of operating on. Like, this deck can do some very, very scary things. And it forces the opponent to play a weird game. I mean, your opponent doesn't want to keep counter magic in their deck because you can just play threats from your graveyard with an activated ability. But then your opponent needs the counter magic because they need to play against your Elder Deep Fiend, and so on and so forth.
Steve resolves a turn 3 Favored Visions.
The game's basically
against
over.
Ryan.
Yeah.
How much damage is that going to do to Ryan over the course of the game?
I'm going to say
12?
12, yeah.
You know, it's almost impossible for him to get all those cards out of his hand.
Yeah. Like, Steve can punish Ryan by simply not playing cards at that point. Like, he can, because the rate at which he can discard cards from his hand is so much greater.
And there's no situation where you would take Fevered Visions out, right? It's just not a card that Ryan can deal with if you stick it early.
Yeah, I think you have to keep that card in.
And we did see it in Game 2.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, in Game 2, had he had that third land on turn 3, he would have played the Favored Visions, and Ryan was tapped out. It would have been a completely different game.
Yeah. Right. Even the cards that are in his hand that he gets out, they replace themselves. Right? Anticipate. He goes up a card on Glimmer of Genius. Torrential Gearhulk sometimes is +2. See the players going through their mulliganing.
I think they've got...
Oh, they're still sideboarding.
It looks like... Are they?
Or maybe they're playing.
Yeah.
Actually, they were looking down at the board and playing some cards. Sorry about that. Thing in the Ice on turn 2 for Ryan. Key to the City was the turn 2 play there for Steve Rubin. He's going to discard a card here. He's going to discard Advanced Stitch Wing. He's going to return it to play by discarding Prized Amalgam and an Advanced Stitch Wing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he gets to bring back the Prized Amalgam on the next turn. And if he did just ignore that thing in the ice problem, this could be a bad situation for him.
So Incendiary Flow, once again, dispatches a Stitchwing Scob permanently. But here comes the Prized Amalgam, and there you see Steve Rubin again using the Key to the City, taking the opportunity to pay the mana, draw an extra card. He is holding Fever Visions.
Yeah, but I mean, the Awoken Horror is kind of terrifying. Right? It's just a horrifying thing to exist.
Okay, Steve Rubin offers up Fevered Visions. Does it resolve? Yes, it does. Yes, it does?
Huh.
Question mark?
It'd be exciting if it did.
All right, it does. There we go. And now, there you see, he's going to use Key to the City to make Prized Amalgam unblockable, and then Harness Lightning is going to take down the Amalgam. And now 2 counters, two spells away from Awoken Horror.
Yeah, and
But Fevered Visions is going to work.
so sick.
So, lots of cards here.
We're deep in flu season right now.
Yeah, Steve Rubin, he's still using the Key to the City to draw. He's going to be able to... See if he has another Stitch Wing in his graveyard. Yes.
Yeah, he's filled his yard up with Stitch Wings.
Goes to the end of his turn, draws a card. Wow. Draws a lot of cards in this deck.
Yeah. When he wants to. And then he can empty his hand when he wants to also.
So 5 cards in hand for Ryan. How does he deal with the Ogre? He also has a Dragon Master Outcast in his hand. So which is kind of a weird dynamic now where he's got to like hold that back because he also is going to need to empty his hand to get his Awoken Horror. You know, this is going to be an interesting game for him to navigate. No, he's going to play the Dragon Master Outcast.
I kind of like playing it because it's a number of different angles for Steve to deal with. Like, Steve can no longer just sit there and let Feared Visions do all the work.
Sure. So discards 2 cards. Back comes Stitchwing Scob. Back is going to come Prized Amalgam. It's like, you draw a card. Don't forget. Ryan falls to 16 from the enchantment, but has a Brutal Expulsion.
Yeah, which, again, just about the perfect card to deal with this set of things. And Brutal Expulsion's a card that I've never been impressed with, honestly. Like, I've never watched a game and been like, oh, wow, this card is working out really well, except in this match that we're watching right now. This is just about the perfect deck to be playing Brutal Expulsion against.
Then you get a look at the colorless card. Devoid, as it were.
Kills Metalcraft Etch Champions.
How does Steve Rubin face off against this thing in the ice? How does he race this?
I think it involves Elder Deep Fiend.
You see Steve go to the end of his turn, drawing an extra card with Fevered Visions. And now with that card in hand, it's going to discard his Prized Amalgam, discard a land, and bring back the Advanced Stitchwing.
Yeah. So that's going to make the Prized Amalgam return in the following turn.
Which happens after the beginning of the end step.
Mm-hmm.
5/5 dragon token is deployed by Ryan. He's going to anticipate. Wow, look at this. Awoken Horror. Send your Stitchwing back home. Yes, I will pick up my Dragon Master Outcast, but I'll just replay it. And Ryan looks like he's got the face of someone who feels like he's taking control of this game.
Oh, yeah.
Steve Rubin's thinking about Elder Deep Fiending here.
It's not even that exciting, though.
Yeah, it's going to come back to his hand.
I guess he gets to tap a bunch of lands.
He has to tap the Awoken Horror.
Yeah.
You know, it saves him from getting hit with that this turn. Ryan uses the tapped mana to anticipate.
I mean, Ryan's still drawing a bunch of cards, and there is still a Fevered Visions in play.
Yeah, I don't think there's 8 turns of Fevered Vision in play here with the Awoken Horror.
No, I don't think there's 8 turns either, but I think that it is possible for Steve to put together enough blockers here.
Here comes.
And I think he wants to play an aggressive game. I think he wants to finish this one off. He wants to start attacking Ryan.
Ryan is on 14. Is that another Fevered Visions in hand?
It looks like it. And I mean, if he attacks Ryan down to 11, then suddenly
that's 4 points a turn.
Yeah.
4 points a turn, and almost impossible for Ryan to get out from under it. All right, here we go. Attack for 3. And remember, he still has an Elder Deep Fiend in hand, too, because that got bounced to his hand.
Yeah.
So here's another Fevered Visions. Advanced Stitchwing's going to be able to come back this turn as well. Two extra cards there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he doesn't. It's hard for him to decide what discard to that Advanced Stitchwing. I guess the extra cards from Fevered Visions are certainly going to help, but
Look at that pained expression.
yeah.
Steve Rubin.
This is hard.
He's like, nope, you go.
You can have this one.
Steve's at 20.
Yeah.
Ryan's gonna fall to 7 this turn from those Fevered Visions.
Oh yeah. This is a tight game.
But that's quite a clock from the Awoken Horror.
And I think that this game's really close. I mean,
Here's the Dragon Master Outcast. That doesn't really accelerate the clock right here. For
now it's
Ryan.
the same amount of
Because
turns.
that dragon will not be able to attack next turn. All it does is threaten to gum up the board.
Just the chump block's relevant, though. Yep. So I believe it's a negate, or maybe a dispel. And then he has a
he's
fiery
really,
temper.
Really agonizing about what to discard here. This is great.
This is about as tight as it gets. Oh man, I believe that's Release the Gremlins.
That's Release the Gremlins. One of the big cards from the Pro Tour.
Card is sweet. Playing red this weekend, I'd be surprised if you don't have at least one copy of that somewhere in your 75.
So here's a Torrential Gearhulk from Ryan. He's got another Brutal Expulsion. He's just going to bounce that Stitchwing back to hand for Steve Rubin.
It's the best he can do.
But he's at 7. animate my wandering fumarole. Look at this.
Yep.
Steve Rubin takes the match 2-1. He
Key to the city.
Key to the city, and the double fevered visions did it for him. That was great.
I wonder where he got that key to the city. Do you think the mayor of the town he lives in gave it to him when he won the Pro Tour?
Possibly. I mean, that is what happens when you win a Pro Tour. Okay, we got a little bit more magic for you coming up this round, but first we got a couple of quick messages.